Well, hey guys, your skin might just be trying to tell you that your cortisol is too high. In today's video, I'm going to be sharing with you 8 signs of high cortisol. Cortisol is a hormone made by your adrenal glands. It is essential and it affects pretty much every organ and tissue in your body. Cortisol regulates your metabolism, how your body utilizes proteins, fats, and carbohydrates. Cortisol also plays a key role in controlling your blood sugar and your blood pressure. It also is vital for how your body responds to stress. Cortisol lowers inflammation throughout the body, and cortisol also is essential in how your body regulates its sleep-wake cycle. Your body has several mechanisms in place to tightly control cortisol levels. You see, too much cortisol is not good, too little cortisol is not good. You want it right in the middle where it needs to be, just right a la Goldilocks. At either end of the spectrum, either extreme, too much or too little, can be catastrophic and life-threatening. In no particular order, sign number 1 of cortisol excess is weight gain. Where weight gain is most notable is in the face. Fatty deposits in the mid-face, especially in the cheeks. This is referred to as plethora, or also sometimes referred to as moon facies. Patients can also develop an increase in fatty deposits in the upper back, giving the appearance of a hump. Sometimes it's referred to as a buffalo hump, although I'm not particularly fond of that terminology. Fatty deposits can accumulate above the clavicle, giving the appearance of a thickened and shortened neck. One of the more striking findings in terms of how fatty deposits accumulate, truncal obesity, putting on a lot of weight in the midsection, whereas the arms and legs appear to be spared of this fat storing. In rare cases, roughly 8%, patients can also develop fatty deposits behind the eyes. Sign number 2 is skin thinning, especially on the elbows and knees, taking on the appearance of wet cigarette paper, very, very fragile and prone to tears. This is also commonly seen on the backs of the hands. Patients who have very high cortisol levels will frequently develop a lot of skin tearing and accumulation of bruising on the backs of the hands. With high cortisol levels, you have atrophy of both the epidermis, the top part of the skin, and the dermis, the deeper part of the skin. Because the epidermis and dermis atrophy, the skin becomes more fragile. The underlying blood vessels beneath the skin can become more apparent. This may be obvious in the form of dilated blood vessels or telangiectasias. Another sign of skin fragility is that with peeling off of tape from the skin surface, say an adhesive bandage, you will easily get skin tearing. Sign number 3 is stretch marks. The medical term for stretch marks is stria. Now, stria occur because A, the skin is a lot thinner as it relates to the atrophy of the dermis here, and oftentimes patients put on a lot of weight very suddenly, especially in the midsection around the abdomen. They also can develop stretch marks in the inner thighs, the arms. Now, in contrast to the stretch marks that are often seen with increased weight gain or with growth spurts or during pregnancy, the stretch marks of high cortisol are much wider, roughly a centimeter, and they have this very striking purple, bright red hue. This is in contrast to the pink to silverish appearance of stretch marks occurring with like pregnancy or growth spurts. In addition to stretch marks in the abdomen, these can be seen on the buttocks, the thighs. Also, they can develop stretch marks on the lower back and the breasts. Sign number 4 is acanthosis nigricans. Now, you'll recall from my video on skin signs of diabetes, we talked about acanthosis nigricans in that video. I also have a whole video dedicated to acanthosis nigricans. What the heck is this? This is a type of velvety skin thickening, velvety in appearance, dark grayish brown, most often occurring on the neck, but it can occur on the face, often occurs under the arms. It also can occur on the backs of the hands. Acanthosis nigricans. It's actually a type of change to the epidermis. Acanthosis nigricans is your skin's way of telling you that there is a problem going on with your body's ability to respond to insulin, otherwise known as insulin resistance. That's why it's commonly seen in diabetes. And as I mentioned at the start of this video, cortisol plays a vital role in regulating your blood glucose. The acanthosis nigricans is your skin's way of telling you, hey, the blood glucose is not quite going right. There's something wrong with insulin going on here. And the reason this happens is that your skin cells are actually responsive to insulin. When the insulin levels are high as it relates to insulin resistance, it's directly going to show up on your skin as a clue that there's an underlying endocrinologic or metabolic problem going on, such as occurred with high cortisol levels. Number 5 is steroid acne. Yes, you can develop very intense acne when your cortisol levels are too high, but it's very different from the acne that you may develop at any point in your life. Cortisol acne is is unique in its appearance in that it erupts all at once, and the lesions of steroid acne all appear more or less the same. It's referred to as monomorphic. Steroid acne can erupt not only on the face, but the neck, the upper chest, the back, and the upper arms as well. It is not uncommon for patients in the hospital who develop high cortisol as it relates to a medication to also develop steroid acne. Steroid acne may actually be related to a little yeast that lives on everyone's skin called Malassezia or Pityrosporum. You see, when the cortisol levels are too high and you have the suppression of the immune system of inflammation as a result, well, then your body starts responding to things that it otherwise had ignored in the past. And one of those is that little yeast that is naturally present on everyone's skin. And a manifestation of that response is steroid acne. Sign number 6, you can have some significant changes in hair growth. Why might that be? Well, as I pointed out at the beginning of the video, the gland that makes cortisol is the adrenal gland. But your adrenal glands also make androgens. Androgens are hormones that can influence hair growth, contribute to hair thinning. This is known as androgenetic alopecia. Androgenetic because it involves the hair follicle's response to androgens, but genetic because there is a genetic component to it. And when the androgen hormones are too high, you can start to experience what's called pattern hair loss. Basically, the hair follicle responds to those elevated androgen levels by miniaturizing, turning into a baby hair. In women, this is often seen as a widening of the central part. In men, you might have a receding hairline, although the presentation can be a bit mixed. Again, some people have a genetic tendency towards androgenetic alopecia, but in the setting of elevated cortisol, the androgenetic alopecia, it is going to be very striking, and it's going to occur much more rapidly than it would as a result of your underlying genetic tendency towards androgenetic alopecia. So much more drastic in onset in terms of the changes in hair growth and hair density. In some cases, women might develop what's called hirsutism, the growth of terminal hairs in a male pattern. This includes hair growth on the upper lip, the sides of the face, the upper chest, around the areola, the abdomen, and the upper thighs. As a side note, recently I did a whole video on acne in your 40s, and we talked a lot about perimenopausal and postmenopausal acne and skin changes, how they relate to the androgen hormones. So definitely check that video out if you missed it. Hirsutism is certainly a potential finding. You also can develop an increase in what's called lanugo hair, downy hair growth, in the setting of high cortisol. Downy, almost peach fuzz. It can happen on the face, the body, and those are just those little vellus hairs. Sign number 7 of high cortisol is delayed wound healing. Why might that be? Well, as I said at the beginning of the video, cortisol lowers inflammation, and you might think, oh, what a wonderful thing. It turns out inflammation is important to a certain extent. Just like cortisol, you can have too much inflammation and you can have too little inflammation. Inflammation is a vital part of the wound healing process. When that inflammation is suppressed too much from high levels of cortisol, well, it results in slow wound healing. So say you get a cut. Not only is that cut going to be more likely to heal with a bruise, it's going to take a lot longer to heal. For somebody with really high cortisol, an not uncommon scenario might be you brush up against something, say the edge of a table, and because the skin is thinning, it tears easily, and that tear takes forever to heal. And because of that, it puts you at risk for scarring as well as skin infections. Speaking of skin infections, my final skin sign of high cortisol is you're getting a lot of skin infections with fungi or yeast. Remember earlier I pointed out that yeast that naturally lives on everyone's skin, Malassezia or Pityrosporum, however you want to name him. Now, in the setting of high cortisol levels, like I said, your body starts to respond differently to that yeast, and you start to develop skin conditions related to an overabundance of that little yeast. Whether it be steroid acne, which we talked about earlier, which might be related to the yeast, or whether it be a condition known as tinea versicolor. Aside from Pityrosporum, there are also a variety of fungi that can infect the skin known as dermatophytes. These cause things like foot fungus, toenail fungus, nail fungus. You're a lot more vulnerable to those when your immune system is so weakened, the inflammation, the inflammatory responses are so depressed from high cortisol levels, you become a lot more vulnerable to these. Likewise, the yeast known as Candida is a lot more comfortable on your skin and mucous membranes in the setting of high cortisol. Your immune system is basically not operating optimally to respond to that Candida yeast. You can get candidal yeast infections in and around the mouth thrush or pearlash, which can result in angular cheilitis. I have a whole video on that. You also can get candidal skin infections in the skin folds, like under the breasts, and you may develop candidal yeast infections in the vagina. But what causes high cortisol levels in the first place? You may have elevated levels of cortisol because you are taking in too much. That might be related to a medication. Some patients are put on a class of medications known as glucocorticoids, prednisone, methylprednisolone, dexamethasone, which can lead to high cortisol levels and the development of these symptoms that we've outlined in today's video. Now, when it comes to putting these medications on the skin, something we use a lot in dermatology, topical glucocorticoids. We use them to treat a lot of different skin conditions, and they can be very effective. They differ in how strong they are, and you actually can absorb these glucocorticoids from the skin depending on the strength, depending on the location, depending on the nature of the skin, and depending on how long you've been using it. And a consequence of that is you can develop these symptoms of high cortisol that we outlined in today's video. Now, under the supervision of a board-certified dermatologist prescribing you corticosteroids to treat a given skin condition, this is very unlikely. Where you can run into this though is there have been reports of certain skin bleaching creams that people buy in the store that have undisclosed amounts of glucocorticoids, corticosteroids. And there are reports of people coming in presenting with these symptoms of high cortisol, Cushing's syndrome, and it's due to a skin bleaching product that they purchased that had undisclosed glucocorticoids in it. So that's something that can happen. And we talked about medications that can impact this and cause high cortisol, but you also have to be wary of dietary supplements. Believe it or not, certain dietary supplements have been found to have undisclosed glucocorticoids in them, namely those marketed as adrenal support supplements. Some of them have been found to have undisclosed amounts of glucocorticoid, and patients present with symptoms of Cushing's syndrome. Come to find out, it's related to one of these dietary supplements. Now, those are causes where the call is coming from outside of the house, but the call can be coming from inside of the house. And by that, I mean you might have a tumor that is leading to high cortisol. There are a few different types of tumors that can cause high cortisol. The first is a tumor that makes a lot of something called ACTH, which tells your body to make more cortisol. These tumors most commonly are located in a part of the brain called the pituitary, or they can be a lung tumor. There are other rarer forms of tumors like this, but most commonly that's where they're going to occur. You also can develop a tumor in your adrenal gland that just pumps out a lot of cortisol, or you can develop a overgrowth of adrenal gland tissue, making overall more cortisol. So those are some potential causes of very high cortisol levels. But I hope this video was helpful to you all in outlining the signs of high cortisol. Now on the end slide, I'm going to link a recent video for you guys on signs of hormone imbalance. So check that one out next if you are at all interested in skin signs of endocrinologic disorders. But if you guys like this video, give it a thumbs up, share it with your friends, and as always, don't forget, sunscreen and subscribe. I'll talk to you guys tomorrow. Bye.